Don't let me leave, Murph. Don't let me leave, Murph. No! 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 No!
The relationship between Ryan Condal and George R.R. Martin has taken a turn, and even calling it rocky might be an understatement. Since the second season of House of the Dragon ended, George has been throwing some serious shade towards Ryan, criticizing his creative decisions and casting some doubt on the quality of the show moving forward. And honestly, it's hard to blame him. Season 2 wasn't the worst television show ever made, but compared to the incredible first season of the show, it's clearly a big step down from it. There are so many plot holes, missing characters and events, and even storylines that either fall flat or are straight out nonsensical.
We will open the gates, we will shed no blood. You will enter as a conqueror.
Just ruining it. Look at my lips, you're ruining it.
So yeah, George R. Martin isn't wrong to be upset about the quality of Season 2, because let's be real, the show is ass.
Yes, I can definitely smell shite.
But what is surprising is how openly and directly he's voicing his disappointment, because George is usually very diplomatic. This all started last year in September when George posted a blog entry on his Not a Blog titled "Beware of the Butterflies." In this blog, George criticized many of the show's creative choices, pointing out how many of them strayed too far from the source material, as well as the initial vision that he and Ryan had discussed for the overall narrative. Although the blog mostly discusses this through the exclusion of the character of Maelor Targaryen, George also expresses his disappointment about how the Blood and Cheese event was adapted on the show, and how Elena's arc seems to have been softened and maybe even ruined as a result. George seemed to be mostly concerned about how these changes would ripple out into the rest of the story, creating devastating consequences to the overall narrative of the dance. The way that he puts it is that it's simplest, yes, and may make sense in terms of budgets and shooting schedules, but simpler is not better. Removing characters like Nettles and Maelor may seem like a small thing, but in George's view, their absence actually chips away at the emotional weight that made the story so compelling to begin with. And this is what George calls the butterfly effect. One small change that unravels the entire tapestry of the story.
What I call the butterfly effect, which I'm sure, being the audience you all understand because you've read Ray Bradbury's The Sound of Thunder, You step on a butterfly in the Pleistocene and it seems very minor, but suddenly you return to the future and all of human history has changed because of that butterfly. A small change can produce large changes later on.
The butterfly effect was also a big problem for Game of Thrones, because by cutting so many characters and storylines from the overall narrative, Dan and Dave ended up not understanding the story and rushing the show into a chaotic conclusion. What was the result of that? Plot holes, a lack of payoff, and a finale that fans would rather forget.
And who has a better story than Bran the Broken?
Just forget about it.
I think that George doesn't want this to happen again, and so in his Not a Blog, he's simply warning Ryan and Sarah about the dangers of the butterfly effect. That's why he asks, what will we offer the fans instead, once we've killed these butterflies? I have no idea, and there are larger, more toxic butterflies to come. It's obvious that George and Ryan obviously don't see eye to eye about Season 2 of the show, and that George's involvement is a lot less hands-on than it was in Season 1. Fans can definitely notice this by the decline of the story's quality. Just like with Game of Thrones, George's absence is leading to a chaotic conclusion for House of the Dragon. it's really unfortunate because George probably really trusted Ryan to stay true to the source material, especially since they discussed the show's direction before filming ever began. But now, it seems like that vision has been abandoned by Ryan, and George is frustrated because the trust is gone. Well, now Ryan has finally responded to George's blog post, and this is what he had to say about straying away from George's vision. He says, "Fire and Blood is this incomplete history, and it requires a lot of joining of the dots and a lot of invention as you go along the way. I will simply say, I made every effort to include George in the adaptation process. I really did. Over years and years. And we really enjoyed a mutually fruitful, I thought, really strong collaboration for a long time. But at some point, as we got deeper down the road, he just became unwilling to acknowledge the practical issues at hand in a reasonable way." Now, wait. Does Ryan Condal really expect us to believe that the changes that he made for the show were for the sake of practicality and reasonableness? What exactly is practical about turning Helena into a quiet, neurodivergent fortune teller who barely reacts to her own son's death, a moment that's supposed to define her arc? What exactly is so practical about rewriting Alicent into someone who betrays her own son to sneak off and have secret meetings with Rhaenyra? What is so practical about making Rhaenyra soft, passive, and forgiving, the total opposite of a Fire and Blood counterpart? To me, these don't seem like practical changes. They seem like stupid changes from a showrunner who thinks that he can do better than George. Ryan comes off as prideful and dismissive, as if George doesn't even understand the pressures of being a showrunner, even though George used to be a showrunner on hit shows like Beauty and the Beast and The Twilight Zone. Unbeknownst to Ryan, George knows exactly what it's like to juggle studio demands and creative vision. In fact, that's why he started writing A Song of Ice and Fire in the first place.
When I did return to books, I said to myself, okay, I've had many things optioned, they never make them. I've done pilots and TV shows, tried to keep them within budget and producible, they never make that. I'm tired of playing that game. I'm gonna, I have a big imagination, I have an epic story I want to tell. I'm gonna make it as big as my imagination.
So I definitely think that Ryan Condal is wrong about this issue, and that he should probably listen to George if he wants to avoid another disaster like Season 8 of Game of Thrones. So far, every change that's been made on the show has been either nonsensical or terrible, and there's no in between. There are changes that could lead to a butterfly effect in which future plotlines are ruined and the overall narrative is destroyed. It could even impact the future success of some of the projects that HBO and George R.R. Martin plan on doing in the future, which is why George R.R. Martin is probably so upset. Already, so many fans are beginning to be wary of projects set in this universe, because so far, none of these projects have concluded successfully. Game of Thrones had a terrible ending, and now House of the Dragon seems to be headed towards the same fate. One begins to worry about how A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms will turn out, or even the TV show about Aegon's conquest. Will the performance of House of the Dragon impact them? What do you think? Was hiring Ryan Condal to adapt The Dance of Dragons a big mistake? And how do you feel about Ryan's comments towards George R. R. Martin in this interview? Let me know down below in the comments section, and if you liked this video, then hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thank you so much for watching this video. Peace.